Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean DeBiase, coming to you live from Reviv's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. I'd like to welcome Matt Renner to the program today. He's a tech industry veteran and president of Microsoft Enterprise Group, who leads a $13 billion division with an organization of over 2,000 people, servicing thousands of clients, including, you guessed it, the world's largest brands. So today we thought we'd cover the remote enterprise, how it's changed just dramatically over the last few months in 2020, and talk about the future of work and commerce and everything that some of you are struggling with out there, both in business as well as personally. So Matt, it's good to see you.
Thank you, sir. Great to see you, Dean. I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time.
Yeah, we just moved our studio here back to Chicago, and we're just barely got hooked up this morning. So you're the first host. Is that good-looking basement there? What are those football? Are those Super Bowl footballs back there?
No, unfortunately, I've earned none of that on the gridiron. Those are more from, I'm a big Texas Longhorn grad and fan, and largely milestones along the way, signed ball, stuff like that. But this is the basement. Everything that's mine gets relegated to the basement here out in the western suburbs. My wife, all the nice stuff goes upstairs. So this is my collection.
Yeah, BTTB, banished to the basement. Those of you who live in Phoenix, you have no idea what that means. So let's talk about your journey. I know you well from a lot of the ecosystems that you've lived in, both Oracle and Microsoft. You've been, how long have you been at Microsoft now?
A year. We're coming up on a year here in July. So about 11 months, give or take,
nice.
Almost a year.
Yeah, you're making a great impact. So maybe just kind of start out, maybe just kind of fill the audience in on, your role and scope and size and the things that you're kind of dealing with now. But what are your focus areas at Microsoft would be great.
Sure. So I'm responsible for the enterprise commercial here in the U.S. It's about the top 2,200 accounts for most industries that are not regulated. So by Microsoft definition, that goes into retail, manufacturing, energy, travel and transportation, professional services. Most commercial industries fall under my responsibility, and it's the top 2,200 accounts for all products. So that's basically the Microsoft infrastructure for B2B in that size of customer, and have a couple thousand folks that help me out to service our customers in that space. So that's probably the best way I can describe the responsibility. Yeah,
maybe a good place to start out with you guys. You've been pretty active in helping companies pivot, your clients. We'll talk about your group later, but kind of pivoting to work from home, how to deal with COVID situations, both in customer facing versus B2B types of different types of companies. So how has it kind of impacted how you're working with servicing customers now?
I think it's been an incredible impact for both sides. Right, the combination early on in frankly the pandemic, and as we got into COVID, it was an incredible volume of customers that needed help to set up a new infrastructure. Meaning they've typically been largely on premise or folks that were in their facilities to go to a remote work environment. And Microsoft Teams is a significant product for us. I think we're up to about 75 million daily users of the product that are actually utilizing that to talk with customers and amongst their individual companies. So enabling customers to work remotely and make that shift was a big part of the early days of where we came through. Microsoft Surface, from a hardware perspective, also a massive surge in requirements there relative to folks that need remote work connection. So it's been a huge shift, and I think the actual making those connections and setting that all up was one phase of it. I think now we're settling in a little bit as to how that's going to progress, meaning customers set it all up. Now they're asking questions like, is it secure? Meaning, is the security strategy that we've chosen going to still apply? Because this is a very different setup that we've had in the past, right. As well as how are we going to amplify how this helps and impacts our business? So I think that's an entire other phase to the conversation. But we definitely have seen a huge surge in enabling at least the new setup and then helping customers connect with their customers.
Yeah, we had the CEO of Logitech on a couple of weeks ago, and just massive amounts of equipment sent out to, homes of just about every employee. It used to just be executives. Now it's everyone.
Right.
So teams up to 75 million users. That's up from what, like low double digits?
You're talking about a fraction over, and again, our projections are we're at about 4 times the forecast we had for this point in this year. Once we turn the corner on January,
Wow.
so it's a classic example of Microsoft itself is down a path of digital transformation and running our business, and one of our largest customers for Azure is Teams, and so the reality of being on Azure allowed us to scale at unprecedented speed for us. On top of the fact that our business practices and our engineering, you talk about the speed that features and requests are coming with that many users and that many customers on the product. The velocity has been unprecedented for us, and it's been amazing to watch as a new Microsoft employee, tech veteran, but Microsoft new, how that's come to be. And a lot of it has to do with the work that went in the last few years of digital transformation to put us in that position. So it's been fun to watch, but it's been hiring for our customers, so it's been tough.
Yeah, take that, Zoom. So we upload this podcast, through Skype, which you also own. How does Skype and, without getting too geeky here, Skype and
right
Meet? It seems like it'd be on the same platform at some point, no?
Yeah, and that's a progress. We have a fair number of customers that have migrated versions of Skype, right, and Skype for Business, and moved on relative to Teams. There's no question we've changed out a fair number of folks and continue to target that. But we still support Skype, obviously, as a major acquisition for us years back, and a product, right? There's still a bunch of users that are being supported from that perspective, and it's this conversation right here. But there's no question that we continue to work on migrating and making it, frankly, palatable and appealing to do that. So I think that's what you'll see in the future as we move forward.
So so that's one platform. Cloud, where are you in cloud-wise? Are you number 1, 2, 3? I know you're one of those.
So it depends who you ask. I will say we're the fastest growing of the big 3, and we kind of categorize our big competitors as the known entities of AWS and GCP as. Absolutely the fastest growing of the 3. It's a huge part of our business. It's a bet that was made over 9 years ago.
That was an early Ballmer bet. That actually was a good one.
It was a bet by a bomber and enhanced and perfected by Satya. And as we've moved forward, it's become a massive part of our focus and a huge part of our evolution, relative to not just being a cloud provider, but to provide the infrastructure, the data estate, the flexibility of everything from AI to ML as you go through, and to enable our customers to make things just that much easier, to be nimble as well as flexible for new business processes. So it's been an important part of our strategy. We're continuing to focus on it. I mean, it's definitely a big part of our growth strategy with the customers. So it's important to us.
Let's just talk about your folks for a bit, if we could. My guess is you are already pretty much a work from home culture, like many of your competitors. Not everyone's in the office, but what's the pandemic lockdown, shut in, use your words, been like for your people and your culture and your operation, and what can people learn from that and other major corporations listening in?
Yeah, it's been definitely a combination of challenges and opportunities. We were about 50-50, right? We were closer, actually slightly more of our employees were actually in a Microsoft office.
Like some others we've had on, like Salesforce, and others are much higher than that.
I think a big chunk of those are engineering. We've got over 50,000 employees in Seattle, right, in Redmond. Yep. So there's a fair number of those that make it in. But we've gradually moved to a more remote workforce. With COVID, we've shifted. I think the number to be, you can't get the exact number, but it's north of 98%, or I think almost 99% of our workers at this moment are remote, right? So we've basically moved everyone to remote work. It's been a transition for us. There's no question. There's a lot of aspects of that we've learned lessons over time, and has been forged by our strategy around how to get through, frankly, the combination of all 3 things going on right now, between the pandemic, the economic slump, obviously from an unrest perspective, and the scenarios over the last 6 weeks, which date much further back, but it all hitting it, amplifying at once. Been a lot of pressure on our folks, frankly. I think a combination of a higher work volume, shifting to the home. How do you draw the line when you are at home as to where work starts and where home starts, and where one stops or the other has created some pressure. Obviously, a combination of the pandemic, worried about your family, worried about your extended family, worried about, in some cases, homeschooling your children. There's a whole bunch of pressure that's come on our folks. And I think we've taken a pretty mindful approach that said, let's be very focused on the mental health and overall health of our employees, because it will transcend to how we take care of our customers. Meaning, if our folks are healthy and focused and in the game, it'll absolutely translate to a better experience for our customers. But I think we've learned a lot about mental breaks. We've learned a lot about being very mindful on your employees and how things are going for them, and to step away from your PC or your Surface, in our case, and make sure that you're getting some air, right, relative to this scenario. And that's been important. I know we've taken a little different strategy than some customers about the messaging around come back to work, right? Because that's been out there. It's been all over the place. Microsoft came out a couple months ago, actually, and set a date of saying October would be the earliest we're going to ask our employees to definitely come back to work, or where we'll go down that path. We did that for a couple reasons. First of all, I think it's a case where you're at least setting an idea of how far at a minimum we believe it will go. But second of all, it took some pressure off those folks I mentioned earlier that were dealing with homeschooling and uncertainties about this summer, uncertainties about school in the fall, and some other pressure dealing with. So what was interesting was what happens in technology, as you've seen in the past, everyone tries to one-up each other. So immediately, 3 of our largest competitors declared December. And then one of our partners, Twitter, just to name names, went to it forever, right? We'll never require our folks to come back.
Yeah, I've actually made fun of them a little bit on the program, because it's not like they're making cars or anything. It's like, it's easy to say that. I don't think that's very visionary. It's but their employees probably like it. I think I need so you said step away from the Surface. I think I need a sign that says that, because the fatigue is real. I mean, not to beat it up. Everyone's covered this, but it's good to see you taking care of your employees. Many companies have like bought them equipment and set them up, and others are just, it's very situational. You just have to ask them what they need. It's like, I need not to be sitting at this desk every 7 days. I need to, and there's no demarcations. There's no commute. So psychological fatigue is, we're going to have a couple authors on talking about that is key.
It is without question. I mean, we're seeing that. I think something else we've been pretty public about was our opinion on. We do feel, though, that we are looking forward to the day where folks do come back to the office. We do think there is a connection, interpersonal connection with each other, interpersonal connection with our customers that we don't want to completely lose. There's no question the balance will change long term. Meaning, I think I see more customers today than I ever have. And now it's through Teams, right? Or it's through other competitors, to be named. But
are you allowed to use the competitive platform?
We will. I mean,
if the customer dials you up, I guess you have to accept the call.
Yeah, we may take a shot or two, but the reality behind it is, of course we do. And there are competitors that frankly are seeing some growth as well. And to be fair, I think. The interesting part, though, is it has made us a lot more productive on at least the last couple of months as customers have embraced remote connections. Like, for instance, if I'm in the sales profession, I would go on a city visit for instance, and I may see 5 or maybe 6 customers in a day. And a lot of that was dictated by their location, schedules, whatever that might be, other things I had on my calendar. That turns into 8 or 9 or 10 today, right? Because the meetings tend to condense a little bit just because they're a lot more productive. There's no travel time, right? So I can go from Phoenix to Dallas in one click, right? And so the reality behind being able to fill a calendar and see more customers and have more impact is material, right? And we're definitely seeing that. But that being said, to your earlier comment, that's a grind. And I love talking with customers, but in all human interaction, there's a little bit about, I guess, the quote of being on, just being engaged and talking to someone without having downtime, and do that for a month, and it adds up. So I think we're looking forward to the balance coming back a little bit.
Yeah, I find there's not enough clarity right now. You used to like have a meeting and then you have to drive somewhere or stop or think or whatever. So I recommend people you got to put 15-minute buffers in there. But anyway, that's a little bit too granular. But you brought up a couple of sectors there. So that's good for, you guys and Zoom and others, bad for United Airlines, American, and Delta, at least in the States. Can you talk about some of the sectors that you service, specifically, maybe start with retail? So in retail, for instance, we've seen, the Revive Beauty Index has kind of shot up with 400% spikes in people using e-commerce and tools, AI tools, to shop. And now with things reopening, there's more of a touchless request. It's not always real in retail stores. So how are you guys helping out your retail sector?
So, it's interesting. Retail, depending on the sector and subsector, right? I mean, big box and, some of the grocery, right? I mean, have seen huge spikes in volume and some of the changes, but they have issues. I mean, there's no questions, new capabilities that they're looking for, such as curbside delivery or touchless experience, as you mentioned there, as well as a huge spike in online presence are all new for them. Coupled with
and some of them have never closed, like Target. They just started putting arrows on the floors. Others, like Macy's, have had all this time to think and reboot and start up. And how do you help them sort all this out with tech?
Well, I think it's interesting, right? There's a fair amount of conversations that are taking place in each of these areas, right? You look into their core businesses around supply chain and flexibility in the supply chain is huge right now, because in a lot of cases, there are small and medium businesses that are either no longer a player or making things difficult in some part of you supplying your stores. So supply chain is one issue. We're working with them to modernize those applications. When you talk about inside of a store, and you're talking about distancing, some of that has to do with, frankly, smart building technologies, proximity, and some of the other scenarios that are out there. We're seeing a big spike in, frankly, some of our no-code, low-code offerings, Power Apps for us personally. For customers, so Power Apps is effectively a low-code, no-code development tool. And it really is a very high-speed, very scalable product that we're seeing a tremendous amount of traction in. That is helping customers bring products to bear very quickly. So for instance, inside of a retailer, when you start talking about working with grocers, they're looking to utilize multiple products from us. Microsoft Teams was one example, but how do you become more efficient internally to handle new delivery techniques or tracking a customer through online, whatever that might be? All of it comes back to typically having to create an app or having to create a process that's very nimble. And in a lot of cases, you're dealing with some fairly old systems that they have. And they're in different points in the digital transformation. In a lot of cases, they're not in a nimble or flexible environment. And they need something to pop in. And Power Apps are a great example of that. We've seen that product quadruple in I'll just give you our forecast in the US. We've had a lot of traction because it's easy to use. It has a wide base of citizen developers that can use the product. And frankly, it broadens you to basically create on the fly some very topical and impactful applications. So that's been a big help for us relative to that. And it's been interesting. But when you look at other industries, we're helping them in different ways, right? You look at some companies that are trying to have to transform. So you take, good visible ones, like the NFL draft was held on Microsoft Teams. The Voice, right? The television program is running on Teams relative to their auditions and frankly how they broadcast. They just televised the Belmont Stakes, right? So you start getting into spectator scenarios where you can't physically be there. How do you recreate that experience that doesn't just look like you're on TV? How does it feel like you're there? And that's what Microsoft is working with, the NBA as well. But I think the impactful stuff for us is where we've been able to help on the societal issues, whether that in some cases you could talk through from a sustainability perspective and helping farmers and as we go through from where we sit there. But we're in the middle of a pandemic. You start talking about healthcare and where we can get involved there and telemedicine, right? And being able to diagnose remotely, being able to service patients remotely. So the products we've been able to utilize and work with customers on, definitely, it feels like, at least from a societal perspective, a little bit bigger impact for us as we work in healthcare, right? Which is probably a pretty good job, a good indicator as well of where you can see the world changing to where when you're not interpersonal, how do you still create applications such as chatbots to talk with you and diagnose a problem, or frankly, the remote diagnosis through Teams, right? There's a lot of different things we've been working with our large healthcare providers with as well.
Yeah, the chatbot technology has it seems to have it seems to have improved a lot, but we're to the point where you're not sure if you're talking with a live agent or not anymore. Whereas the old ones were, do you see that as a growing trend, or people get? I mean, it's kind of a subset of AI, if you will.
It's a fine line, right? I think it's definitely a growing trend. I mean, it's typically getting built into most of the interaction. I mean, it's tough to get on a website of any technology company these days without a bot popping up and asking you a question or trying to capture something, right? Especially,
Right. Just leave me alone. Let me shop.
but I'll click through it myself sometimes. But the reality is there are situations, especially in customer service, where I think
Yep.
there are a fair amount of triaging that can go on that customers recognize rather than wait 10, 15 minutes if it's a quick answer, a question about a bill or there are some things where I think the bots
That's easy AI because it's so reoccurring. You see the patterns, the connected tissue, muscle memory, I think we call it.
Yeah, a lot of productivity gains for sure.
We talk a lot on the program about growth, innovation, governance around that, like how you grow companies. A lot of CEOs and presidents struggle with that. How does your team or your top team anyway kind of work with Microsoft innovation, product teams, R&D? How do you kind of help them innovate better and faster? And you've got some pretty tough competitors, by the way, very well funded, I might add.
Yeah. Listen, and they're not without aggressive strategies, right?
No, they're not.
And good companies.
Even the slow ones are a little aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, what I like about Microsoft, and I'll give you a comparison. So my history, I've spent time with a couple of the larger software providers and great companies. But the reality with Microsoft is we've taken a pretty programmatic approach to invest with our customers up front, meaning rather than have it tit for tat relative to investment, we will typically invest and bet on the come a little bit to try to innovate. And the more innovative the project, the more we will tend to invest. It's very exciting for us to hit those. You got the McKinsey Horizon model if you've seen it in the past, but those Horizon 3 customers that want to shift their business model or pivot, right? Whether it's a retailer that wants to get into healthcare, which is a good example of that, or it's a comms media company that's trying to compete on scene to screen of bringing their content to the consumer much faster than the old way that it was put together. That type of stuff gets us very excited. So we'll invest with kind of some of our of technology. We'll invest with consultants and architects. We'll typically do our part. We ask for the customer to invest, of course. It's not a one-way scenario. But I think what's interesting with Microsoft is we're very open to that. And I think there is a continuum. I was excited about that when I got here and frankly researched making the move. Was Microsoft has shifted over the last decade almost completely to a very customer-centric approach.
Yeah, and co-creation, we call that at Kellogg, and partnering with startups and other organizations, but in your case, customers.
It's customers, right? And by the way, we have a massive partner community that is very important to us. It's a very important to our success. I have 4 times the feet on the street that are outside of Microsoft than I have of my disposal, right? So the reality of
that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, they're partners. I mean, Microsoft is I would also say of the 3 companies I've been with, Microsoft has probably the best heart when it comes to partnering as well. I think we are looking for a win-win. I'm amazed every day, and it's not hard to spot them. Even some of our staunchest competitors in certain areas, we will partner if it makes sense in others. We don't write off competitors because we compete in one area, because Microsoft probably has the broadest footprint in the industry when you talk about really end-to-end everything we do.
Yeah, we talked about that on the first time we taped this program was 10 years ago with Martin Sorrell, and his big buzzword back then was frenemies that everyone picked up on. And it's real. I mean, so 4 times, that means you almost have 10,000 people out there singing your praises,
and that's probably
plus your own. Yeah. Yeah,
it's probably low. I mean, the reality is it's even bigger when you really take into the families of the SIs, right? Are going to help us, frankly, share in enabling
system integrators.
Yep, SI system integrators or ISVs, independent software providers that are partners that help us either contribute to or round out solutions with us. It's a combination of all 3 that, and a lot of times, end up in a solution. And Microsoft is a very good, very mindful, large organization of partner. Frankly, partner support, we call OCP, or One Commercial Partner here in the US, that wake up every morning just trying to make those connections, just trying to make sure that we're proactively helping each other. I sponsor a fair number of them myself here in the U.S. So it's been interesting.
What about any couple of tech trends that you like more than others? What are you seeing?
I think there's no question that we see a tremendous amount of focus on data right now. And I use the term data. I mean, that's a broad term, but the reality behind AI and ML and getting into the scenario, when you look at all this connectivity that's being created by necessity or in the past, whether that's a lot more a digitized e-commerce platform or a supply chain or frankly interaction of collaboration on Zoom and obviously from my perspective teams and any other scenario that you're looking at, right. A lot more data, and the data estate is growing at a pace that is unprecedented, meaning in some cases quadrupling, over the next 10 years versus where it's been in the past. Why that's important is we're continuing to see companies double down on trying to figure out how to just keep up relative to the competitive environment and landscape and their ability to be nimble and figure out what's going on with their customers, their suppliers, how do they optimize. So I would tell you the trend, if it makes sense, it's an old trend, but it's a new trend, is data, right? You're seeing a huge push on the data side. Tremendous push, when we look into, frankly, customers trying to optimize their infrastructure, meaning this cloud scenario is becoming a massive push. And what that is just modernizing their technology, right? Getting to a digital spot where you're flexible, you can scale, you're secure, all very important parts. And so when we look at what's hot, data's hot, security is hot, cloud is hot. I mean, they're all very mindful places that customers are going to for one reason or another. But at the very end of the day, it's to use technology to be better, faster, cheaper, right? Yep. And I think those all come together.
Matt, we want to thank you for being on the program. How about some parting words for some of the big enterprise leaders out there that are listening in or going to be listening into the podcast here over the next few months on what they should be thinking about in terms of their strategy and growth?
I think I go back to that comment, which is things are moving at an unbelievable pace, meaning the acceleration that COVID and all of the scenarios we're dealing with right now has applied to all companies at this point is significant. And I think it's really exposed where customers are. And some customers, even in some of the toughest industries you just mentioned earlier, you get into travel and transportation. In the energy industry, this is the first time we've ever seen pressure, not only from a price perspective, but a demand perspective, right? You're talking about not just decade, but century type scenarios that are occurring. Even in those hardest hit industries, what we're seeing is customers are taking a step back and in some cases going one of three ways. In some cases, they're battening down the hatches and not making moves to see what happens next. In more cases, we're seeing a couple of things happen. One is we're seeing a fair amount invest in accelerating their path to get to a more optimized and efficient technology stack, which means you're moving to the cloud faster. And other folks are using this as an opportunity to just retool, right? We can focus on technology right now because the volumes are down. And do we go down to build the next generation of this company out there? So what I'd say is, if you're any company, any industry, I would say taking a mindful approach to take advantage of this, whether it's to accelerate and optimize or it's to reinvent. I think it's a true opportunity right now, regardless of what your natural feelings may be towards, in some cases, economic impact. I do think it's an opportunity to move forward. So that's probably the best thing I could leave you with relative to what we're seeing. I do think it's a tremendous time for technology. Microsoft, just as a shameless plug, we're looking to take care of our customers first, and that they continue to reach out and we continue to respond. But we're not perfect, right? So we're always looking for input on ways we can help and partner. So, again, I think that's our tagline, loosely stated, is basically to enable every person on the planet to achieve more through technology. And the reality is that's our mission statement of what we're trying to accomplish. So we'll continue to do that and continue to look to partner with our customers. So, Dean, I really do appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you and to participate. This has been great.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us, Matt. You've listened to Matt Renner, the president of Microsoft Enterprise Group, focused on the U.S., and more to come. Good to see you. So, take care of yourself.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.